I'm Scott Matzel and welcome to Drive 61's University Series. In today's tutorial we're taking a look at how to get the most out of your time on track at a test day. Now test days can be very expensive. The fee itself for the test day is a lot of money. Getting your car there, the team and running costs when you're actually at the test day. So it's very important that we use this time on track as efficiently as we possibly can. So the first thing I'm going to take a look at is the actual days that we can test on. Now in recent years there's been more and more race cars in the UK going and testing on actual track days. Now for those of you who don't know, track days are for any cars and you only need a driving license, a standard driving license to drive on the track days. Test days are only for racing cars and you need to have a racing license to drive on those days. But as I just mentioned, in recent years, more and more racing cars have been going on track days and actually causing a little bit of a problem. In the case where the racing cars go on the track days, it's bad for both the racing drivers and the track day drivers. Firstly, there's safety issues. There can be massive differences in the speed of a GT3 racing car versus just a standard road car, of course. Also, the track day drivers can become intimidated by the aggressiveness or the faster racing cars, which is obviously a problem. And then from the racing driver's point of view, it's very difficult to get a complete lap in. So if you are going there to test a car, whether it be setup or finding an absolute time, then it's almost impossible to get a complete lap in without overtaking some traffic, which obviously ruins the lap. So with all this in mind, I would recommend that if you are testing a racing car, ready to go racing, then purely use test days. Stay away from the track days. You don't want to get involved with all the road cars slowing you down and frustrating you when you're trying to put a good lap together. So with all that in mind, we have a few different test day formats in the UK at least. First of all, we have the open pit lane format, which is where you turn up and at 9 o'clock the circuit opens and you can go on track whenever you want to. You can do an hour session if you want to. You could do 2 hours or even 20 minutes, whatever it may be. The second type of format is a session format. Now the cars will be grouped together, usually by lap time or their class, and you will have, say, 20 minutes or 30 minutes every hour on track. The third format is a semi-exclusive day. Now, in the last couple of years, MSV circuits in the UK have started doing these semi-exclusive days, which are actually really good. They'll limit the car numbers to maybe 12 cars per day, and you can go out on the circuit whenever you want. So they'll run them in an open pit lane format. But because there's much lower numbers, you get lots and lots of clear running. Now, obviously, these semi-exclusive days are a little bit more expensive, but the quality of time that you get on circuit is just fantastic. And finally, we have a full exclusive. So if you really have the budget to do so, you can hire a circuit to yourself and just run as you want on the circuit. Now, for the normal racing driver, this is very unusual because obviously hiring a circuit outright is very expensive. So of all these four formats, for me, the best format is the semi-exclusives. If you've got the budget to do that, where they limit the cars to only 12 cars per day, it's fantastic and really valuable time on track because you rarely come across another car. You can do many free and clean laps and you can work on whatever you want during the day. So if you can afford it, go for the semi-exclusive test days. So as time can be very short on a test day, especially in a sessioned type test day where you may only have 4 or 5 sessions within the day, it's really important to plan your day as much as you possibly can and even plan each session individually. So in the morning or even in the week before, sit down with your team and your driver coach if you have one and define what the goals are for that particular test day. Now there's a few things that you can think about when you're defining the goals or a mix of these things. You may be at the circuit to learn the circuit if you've never been there before. You may be there to improve your driving technique, in which case you should have a driver coach there helping you. You may be there for the team to test some new mechanical parts, whether it be a new gearbox or some new aerodynamic devices. You may be there to work on setup, in which case you need to use each session very, very efficiently, come in, make a change, and then go back out again so you can see what the difference is with the setup. Or you may be there to prepare for a race weekend. And if you're there for a race weekend, say on the Friday before the race weekend, you may want to run a qualifying simulation, which is where you will actually simulate the exact process that you'll go through in qualifying. So for example, you'll put some new tyres on, you'll have the minimum amount of fuel in the car to keep the car light, and you'll go and do just a few laps and try and set the absolute best time that you can. You might also be completing a race simulation where you'll go out and do the 30 minutes of race length, or the 12 or 15 laps, whatever it may be, and simulate the actual race, obviously without racing the other cars on the test day. Now, when you're doing these race weekend simulations, you need to think about when you put the tyres on, when you have the low fuel runs. And when you're planning your day, it's important that you think about these things. Obviously, tyres are expensive to put on the car. So, for example, if you use the first couple of sessions to improve your technique and get yourself back into the car on the circuit, in the third session, when you want to simulate the qualifying run, that's when you put your new tyres on. That's when you have the low fuel load. And that's when you go and set the quickest lap time that you possibly can. So the first session and the first laps of that first session are very important. It may be that you've not been in the car for a while, and it may be that the car's not run for a while. So it's important that before we get up to speed, that you check a few things, get yourself back into the zone, and build up the pace and check the car before you really get going. So first of all, you'll need to speak with the team and ask them if they need to do an installation lap. Now, with some more complex cars, some more complex racing cars, it's likely that you'll have to just go out the pits, do one lap, come back into the pits so the team can have a look over the car, make sure there's no leaks, make sure there's no problems before they send you back out on the circuit again. It's also worth bearing in mind at this point that you may have new discs or pads, which of course the team will tell you, and you may need to bed these in and build them up to temperature nice and steadily. Also, there may be some other parts on the car that the team will ask you to check. So once you've done these checks, it's time to begin to bring the tyres up to temperature, which I'm going to do another tutorial on, and really the detail of how to get the tyres up to temperature properly. And you'll want to bring the brakes up to temperature before you really start pushing. At this point, once you've done a couple of laps, it's worth checking the oil temperature and the water temperature on your race car. Obviously, if it's a cool day, the team will have put some blanking on the radiators so that we bring the temperature of the engine up a little bit. And this is quite a difficult thing to do, so it's your job when you're out on the circuit to check the oil and water temperature to make sure it's in the correct parameter. Then it's time to start pushing, bringing the car up to speed, finding the limit of the car. Now, it's important that you don't just cruise around for the whole of this first session. As we mentioned, the time is limited, so once you've done all the checks, it's then time to start pushing, finding what condition the circuit's in, finding where the limit of the car is, and really begin to push yourself to get a good lap. Towards the end of the session, it's time to push really hard to get a good benchmark lap time so that you have some good data to take out of your V-Box or whatever it may be. So then you can gauge your performance through the rest of the day. So finally, some tips to make your driving on track even more efficient. Now, the first thing, as I've spoken about before, and as I'm going to speak about in the next tutorial, is to use a driver coach. Now, yes, driver coaches can be expensive, but when you compare that to the cost of going to a test day, taking the car there, taking the team there if you have one, it actually becomes quite cheap. And if you use a driver coach, the speed in which you progress will be so much more quick than if you don't have a driver coach. So the driver coach will help you with your driving technique. He will look at the data. He will help you with setup. He will even get in the car with you and give you some pointers when you're out on the circuit. So they're really worth their money. And if there's one thing to make your test day more efficient, it's to use a driver coach. The second thing is at the end of each session, and again, I'm going to go over this in another tutorial in more detail, make notes. Make notes about the circuit, make notes about your driving, make notes about where you're braking, where you're turning the car into the corner. And this process of downloading all of this information from your brain and putting it onto a circuit map, because that's what you should do. You should write down the notes on each corner at turn in, apex and exit about what the car's doing, where the curbs are, and how you're reacting and where you're looking, all of these things. As I mentioned, we're going to go over this in another tutorial. And this process of downloading this information will really help you think about the circuit and the car and actually put it into your subconscious, so the next time that you go out onto the circuit, you'll feel like you feel a lot more of the circuit and you see a lot more of the information. And the final thing that I'll say to make your test day efficient is actually don't drive too much. When you're new to circuit driving, even if you're quite experienced, the amount of concentration and the focus it takes to drive at the limit of the car on the circuit is absolutely massive. So your sessions, try to keep them to 15 or 20 minutes in length. If you feel like you begin to make mistakes or you're finding it difficult to concentrate, come back into the pits, because it's likely that you won't be progressing anyway and you'll be making these small mistakes. It happens to almost all the drivers that I coach. And then the other thing is, it's not only the session length that you need to be careful of, it's the duration through the day and how you actually fatigue throughout the day. So I have one driver, for example, who is fantastic in the morning. First couple of sessions are excellent, makes great progress, is really quick. Third session, or the first session after lunch, starts to tail off a little bit. And then the fourth session, if we ever run it, he's just completely off the pace and making silly mistakes. So my advice is to actually stop when you feel that you're becoming less consistent, when you're making those mistakes, and stop the day then, because it's likely that you're not going to progress. And this is when the big mistakes happen and you could possibly have a spin or an accident in your car. So that's all for this week's tutorial. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed it, please share it. It helps us to keep this content free, and I'll see you next time.